Hello everyone, we are Group 23. Today, our group looks at a major shift in global trade. President Trump's sweeping tariffs announced on April 2, 2025, which shocked markets worldwide. This event, now known as Liberation Day, marked a clear move away from free trade toward aggressive protectionism. But we are asking a deeper question. What does this mean for the US dollar's global role? Can the dollar remain dominant in a world where trust in US policy is shaken? In this presentation, we will trace the dollar's rise, explore how tariffs connect to US debt, and consider whether Trump's strategy risks long-term instability in exchange for short-term gains. Let's begin by understanding the power behind the dollar and whether it can survive this gamble.
April 2nd, 2025, now widely referred to as Liberation Day, marked a turning point in global trade policy. On this day, President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs against nearly every trading partner of the United States. It didn't matter if they were allies or competitors, everyone was included. The reaction was immediate and severe. The Dow Jones Index plummeted 4,000 points within 48 hours, one of the fastest drops in history. Japan's Nikkei 225 fell by 8%, tracking circuit breakers. Australia's ASX lost 60 billion Australian dollars in market value in just days. Markets around the world spiraled into panic. Investors fled to safe haven assets, and many began questioning the future of global trade norms. 1 week later, on April 9th, Trump announced a temporary 90-day pause on these tariffs, except for China. This led to a short-term rebounding in markets, but this underlying uncertainty remained. Here we stand at the critical junction, a moment where the United States, once a global champion of free trade, appears to be shifting course. This slide reflects the key research questions that form our analysis of Trump's 2022 tariff policy. We ask, what role does US dollar play in this tariff strategy? Is it just about trade, or is it about reinforcing the dollar's global dominance? Does this shift to protectionism directly contradict America's conditional free trade stance? Can Trump win this new game economically and politically without losing the credibility of US dollar? What happens after 90-day tariff pause ends? Will the market stabilize or collapse again? Can tariffs reduce the 36 trillion US debt, or is it simply political theater? And finally, could this political spark a broader global economic crisis, or worse, a collapse in trade in US dollar itself? As this image shows, we're at a crossroads: free trade or protectionism, stability or disruption.
We look at how the US dollar became the world's dominant reserve currency. It started in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement, where 44 nations pegged their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar to gold. In 1971, Nixon ended gold convertibility, turning the dollar into a fiat currency. Since the 1970s, the dollar has remained central in global trade, oil pricing, and central bank reserves. These key main stories show how the dollar gained structural power and provide tax from U.S. policies like tariffs and debt management today. Since 1971, the United States has no longer tied its currency to gold. allowing its national debt to show significantly reach a total of 36.2 trillion by 2024, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Looking ahead, the federal budget deficit is projected to hit 2 trillion in 2025. This persistent and growing fiscal imbalance reflects a deeper structural issue in U.S. economy, which in part explains the Trump administration's reliance on tariffs and economic nationalism. By imposing tariffs, the government sought to reduce dependence on imports and increasing revenue without directly addressing the long-term debt barrier, an approach only possible because of dollar privileged global reverse status.
Now I want to talk about how Trump used tariffs and the power of the US dollar to his advantage. Tariffs are meant to limit imports and protect local industries, but what's unique is how Trump used the US dollar's global status. Other countries still depended on the dollar, while the US enforced tariffs. This allowed the US to benefit both from protectionism and from being the world's financial center. Then came the 19-day pause announced on April 9, which excluded China markets briefly calmed, but this was a false sense of security. Investors were uncertain, not confident. The world is still waiting for clear US policy signals. Leaving China out made it clear. This conflict is more strategy than economic. So what happens after 19 days? We might see more trade wars as other countries respond, big market swings from growing uncertainty, and a shift away from the US dollar with countries exploring new trade systems like using BRICS currency or local currencies. In short, Trump's strategy may bring short-term gains, but it risks long-term global instability and changes to US dollar dominance. Thank you.
I want to briefly discuss what it would take for President Trump to win through his tariff strategy, and more importantly, the serious risks it may trigger. To succeed, three conditions must hold. First, other countries must continue to accept the US dollar as a global reserve currency. Second, there must be no major retaliatory tariffs or joint action from other global powers. And third, global markets must continue to trust the long-term stability of the US economy. However, there are significant risks that may prevent success. We could see multilateral retaliation from countries like the US or China. Investor confidence could drop sharply, triggering capital flight and financial contagion. And perhaps most seriously, the credibility of the US dollar may weaken. If the world loses faith in the US dollars, the US could lose its seigniorage advantage, meaning it can no longer borrow cheaply by printing money. So, what is really behind this tariff policy? It's not just protectionism, it's a strategic use of the dollar's hegemonic position to dominate global trade rather than support free trade. Trump's strategy might bring short-term economic gains for the US, but at a cost. It risks triggering a global move toward the dollarization, which could ultimately undermine US financial dominance. In conclusion, this policy may be less of a strategic result and more of a crisis trigger. Short-term wins could come at the expense of long-term global stability and potentially the end of the US dollar's supremacy. Thank you. And this is our reference list. Thank you for listening.